The evening was cool, and the city lights had just begun to shimmer against the glass towers. The streets were filled with cars rushing home, people hurrying past with phones in hand, and the scent of roasted coffee drifting out of cafes that lined the main road. Inside one of those tall buildings sat a man who rarely looked up from his work, a man who had everything people dreamed of but felt emptier with each passing year. He was a CEO, known for his sharp mind and colder personality. His employees respected him, but few dared to speak to him unless it was about numbers or deadlines. He moved through life with a strict routine, office, meetings, dinners with clients, and back home to an empty penthouse that overlooked the city. To him, emotions were distractions. Feelings made people weak, and he had no room for weakness. That evening, as he closed his laptop and straightened his tie, he felt an odd tiredness deep inside, not just from the long day, but from the silence that always followed when work was done. He walked out of the building, nodding briefly to the security guard before stepping into the crisp air. The night was calm, the sky dim with a hint of gold from the fading sun. He loosened his tie as he walked toward his car parked near a small coffee shop. He was about to unlock the car when he heard a small, timid voice behind him. "Sir, excuse me, sir?" He turned, expecting maybe a worker asking for directions. But instead he saw a little girl standing there, no older than 7. She wore a faded pink sweater, her hair tied in a loose ponytail, and she was clutching a small, worn-out teddy bear that looked like it had been hugged one too many times. Her shoes were scuffed, and she looked nervous, as if she wasn't sure she should be talking to him at all. "Yes," he said, his tone polite but distant. She hesitated, her fingers gripping the bear tighter. Then, after a deep breath, she looked up at him with wide, hopeful eyes and asked softly, "Sir, could you pretend to be my daddy? Just for one day?" The man froze, not sure he had heard correctly. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice gentle but puzzled. She swallowed hard. "I just need a daddy for tomorrow." "Just for one day," she said, her voice trembling a little. He blinked, completely thrown off. He had handled million-dollar deals, fired people without blinking, and faced angry board members. But this tiny girl standing there with her teddy bear had managed to make him speechless. He knelt a little so he wasn't towering over her. "Why do you need someone to pretend to be your father?" he asked softly. The girl looked down, kicking at the pavement with the toe of her shoe. "It's for my school," she whispered. "They're having a father-daughter day tomorrow. Everyone's supposed to bring their dads." She glanced up at him again, eyes shining with something between hope and fear. "I don't have one anymore, and I don't want to be the only one there without a daddy. Everyone will laugh." The man felt something shift inside him, something he couldn't quite explain. He had gone years without letting feelings get to him, but hearing that from her made his chest feel heavy. He stood quietly for a moment, not sure what to say. "Where's your mother?" he asked finally. "She's at work," the girl replied quickly. "She works at the bakery across the street. She said she can't come tomorrow because she has to work double shifts. She felt bad. She cried last night." Her voice got softer. "I told her it's okay, but it's not really okay." He looked at her small hands clutching the teddy, the tired look in her eyes that no child should have. He glanced toward the bakery she mentioned, seeing a faint glow from across the street where a few people were still cleaning up inside. For a moment, he thought about walking away. This wasn't his problem. He didn't know this girl or her mother. But then he saw how she looked at him, like he was her only hope. He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "You shouldn't talk to strangers, you know," he said gently. "I know," she whispered. "But I didn't know what else to do. You look nice, and you look like a dad." That made him pause. No one had ever called him nice before. Not at work, not in his personal life, not even his ex who once told him he was too cold to love. Yet this little stranger who knew nothing about him had said it without hesitation. He smiled faintly. "I look like a dad, huh?" She nodded quickly. "A proper one, with a suit and everything." He couldn't help but chuckle softly. "And what would I have to do if I said yes?" Her face brightened a little. "Just come with me to school tomorrow. We'll sit together, play some games, and there's a small show. That's all." He looked at her teddy bear, noticing that one of its eyes was missing. "What's your teddy's name?" he asked, partly to change the subject, partly because he didn't know how to answer yet. Mr. Buttons, she said proudly. He's been with me since I was a baby. He used to belong to my dad. He nodded slowly, feeling that same heaviness return. There was a lump forming in his throat and he didn't like it. It had been years since he'd allowed any emotion to sit this close. He glanced at his watch, already past 7. His driver would probably be waiting, but instead of leaving, he found himself sitting down at a nearby bench, motioning for her to join him. "All right," he said carefully. "Tell me your name." "It's Lila," she said, her voice perking up just a little. "What's yours?" He hesitated before answering. "You can call me, sir," he said awkwardly. He wasn't used to kids asking personal questions. Lila giggled softly. "That's a funny name. You can't go to school with me as sir. They'll think you're a teacher." He almost smiled again. "Fair point," he said. "Well, let's think about this. You don't even know me. What if I was a bad person?" She looked at him thoughtfully. "You're not," she said confidently. "Bad people don't stop to listen." "You did." Her words caught him off guard. He stared at her for a long second, wondering how such a small child could speak with such certainty. He'd built his whole life on judging people, investors, employees, competitors, and yet somehow this little girl had judged him better than anyone ever had. He exhaled slowly. "All right," he said at last. "I'll think about it." Her face fell slightly. "Please," she whispered. "It's only one day. I promise I won't ask for anything else." The desperation in her voice tugged at something deep inside him. He remembered being young once, sitting alone after his parents' divorce, waiting for a father who never showed up. He had buried that memory long ago, but tonight it came rushing back like a wave he couldn't stop. He rubbed his temple. "You said the event's tomorrow morning?" "Yes, at 10 o'clock. At Maple Grove School," she said quickly, eyes wide with renewed hope. "You can just wear something nice but not too fancy. We'll play games and make cards together." He looked at her, then at the street, then back again. Finally, he nodded slightly. "We'll see, Lila. I can't promise, but I'll try." Her smile lit up her whole face like the city lights had just been switched on inside her. "Really?" she asked eagerly. "Really," he said quietly. She jumped a little in excitement, hugging her teddy close. "Thank you, sir. I'll wait for you by the school gate tomorrow. I'll wear this same sweater so you'll know it's me." He nodded, watching as she turned and ran toward the bakery across the street. Through the window he saw her mother, tired, with flour still on her apron, look up in surprise as Lila came running in, her face glowing with happiness. He stood there for a while, hands in his pockets, staring at the small bakery until the lights inside dimmed. Something about that moment stayed with him. The warmth of her smile, the way she'd spoken with such innocent hope. As he got into his car, his phone buzzed with a reminder for a morning meeting. Normally, he would have confirmed it without thinking. But tonight, he stared at the screen, hesitating. After a long pause, he typed a short message to his assistant. "Reschedule my morning meeting to the afternoon." He leaned back in his seat, the hum of the engine fading into the quiet of his thoughts. He didn't know why he had agreed. He didn't know what had come over him. But something about that child, that tiny voice asking for something so simple, had touched a part of him he thought was gone forever. As the car pulled away, he looked out the window at the bakery one last time. He could see Lila inside, sitting at a small table with her mother, talking excitedly, waving her hands, her teddy bear sitting beside her. Her mother looked confused but smiled anyway, brushing a strand of hair from her tired face. He turned away before the light changed, feeling something strange in his chest, and not quite sadness, not quite joy, just something alive. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about contracts or profits or schedules. He was thinking about a little girl who had asked him to pretend to be her father, and about how, somehow, that small request had made the world feel a little less cold. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her voice replayed in his head. "Sir, could you pretend to be my daddy? Just for one day?" He smiled faintly to himself before closing his eyes. He didn't know it yet, but that one question was about to change his life forever. The next morning came slowly, with the sunlight slipping through tall glass windows of the CEO's penthouse. Usually he would be up early, drinking black coffee while reading emails before heading to another long day at work. But today felt different. He woke up with an unfamiliar thought in his mind, a little girl's voice echoing softly. "Sir, Could you pretend to be my daddy? Just for one day? He sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his face, wondering why that small voice had kept him awake most of the night. He wasn't the kind of man who changed his routine for anyone. Yet here he was, staring at the clock and thinking about a promise he never officially made. His phone buzzed with notifications, meetings, reports, a lunch with a client. He ignored them all for a while. Instead, he opened his closet and stared at the rows of perfectly pressed suits. For once, they didn't feel right. He finally chose a simple white shirt, light gray pants, and left the tie behind. It was strange. He felt like he was preparing for something important, though he couldn't quite say why. When he stepped out of his building, the air was fresh. The streets were already busy, but he noticed things he usually ignored. The laughter of children walking to school, a man feeding pigeons on the corner, a young woman hurrying with her coffee in hand. Everything seemed a little softer this morning. His driver looked surprised when he gave a new destination. Maple Grove School, he said calmly. The driver blinked. Sir, that's in the old part of town. Should I cancel your morning meeting? He hesitated only for a second before answering. Yes, cancel everything till noon. It took about 20 minutes to reach the school. It wasn't large or fancy. The walls were painted bright yellow, with drawings made by students hanging near the gate. Parents stood around chatting and taking pictures with their children. There was laughter, music, and the smell of pancakes from a nearby stall. Then he saw her, Lila, standing near the gate, wearing the same pink sweater and holding her teddy bear tightly. When she spotted him, her whole face lit up. She waved so hard that her bear nearly fell out of her arms. You came, she shouted, running toward him. He smiled, a real smile, not the practiced one he gave at business dinners. I said I'd try, he said softly. And I did. Lila looked him up and down. You look nice. Like a real daddy, she said proudly. He chuckled quietly. That's a good start then. She reached out and took his hand without asking. Her small fingers wrapped around his, and somehow that single touch melted the last bit of hesitation he had. Together they walked through the gate, blending in with the other parents. Inside the schoolyard, colorful banners hung across the field. Children laughed, playing tag or showing off projects they had made with their fathers. Teachers moved around organizing small games and activities. One teacher, a kind-looking woman with glasses, approached them. Oh, hello. You must be Lila's father, she said warmly. For a second he froze. Then he caught Lila's wide, hopeful eyes looking up at him. Something inside told him to go along. Yes, he said smoothly with a small nod. I'm here for the event, the teacher smiled. Wonderful. Lila always talks about you. She'll be so happy you could make it. He glanced down at Lila, who gave him an awkward little grin, clearly relieved. She tugged his sleeve. Come on, Daddy, the games are starting. The word Daddy hit him like a soft punch. It had been years since anyone had called him that. In truth, no one ever had. He didn't have children. His life had been too full of business and too empty of love for that. But hearing it now from her small voice, even in pretend, stirred something deep in his chest. They joined the first game, where children and their fathers had to draw each other on paper. Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, her tongue poking out slightly as she focused on her sketch. Every few seconds she looked up at him, then back at the paper. When she was done, she proudly held it up. It was a stick figure wearing a gray shirt, with a big smile and long arms holding a teddy bear. This is you, she said proudly. He laughed softly. You made me look very tall. You are tall, she said seriously, and strong too. He looked at her simple drawing again, noticing she had written "My Daddy" in big letters across the top. For some reason, it made his throat feel tight. He hadn't expected something so innocent to affect him like this. Then it was his turn to draw her. He wasn't good at art, but he tried. He drew a small girl with bright eyes and a big smile, holding a teddy bear with one missing eye. When he showed it to her, she gasped. That's me, he nodded. Yes, that's you, and Mr. Buttons too, she giggled. You even remembered his name. The teacher came around again, clapping her hands. All right, everyone. It's time for the three-legged race. Fathers and daughters, please line up. Lila's eyes sparkled. Can we do it, please? He hesitated for a second. I haven't done that since I was a kid. Then it's time to try again, she said firmly. So he did. They tied their legs together, awkwardly balancing while laughing along with the other pairs. When the whistle blew, they stumbled forward, almost falling several times, but Lila's laughter made everything easier. Halfway through, they tripped and landed on the grass. She laughed so hard she couldn't breathe, and for a moment he found himself laughing too. A real warm laugh that surprised even him. They didn't win the race, but it didn't matter. Lila jumped up, brushing grass off her sweater. "We did great," she said proudly. "Yes," he said with a smile. "We did." The morning went on with games, songs, and small performances. At one point, all the children went up on stage to sing a song about fathers, about love, guidance, and promises. He watched as Lila sang, holding her teddy close. Her voice wasn't the loudest, but it carried a quiet sincerity that reached him even from afar. When the performance ended, she ran to him and hugged him tightly around the waist. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I didn't think anyone would." He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're welcome," he said quietly. "You did great up there." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "Did you see me singing?" "I did." "You were amazing," he said sincerely. For a long moment they just stood there, him, a man who had everything but never felt much, and her, a little girl who had almost nothing but gave her joy freely. It was strange how comfortable he felt in that moment, surrounded by laughter, music, and small hands holding balloons. After the event ended, the parents started leaving. Some waved goodbye, others took group photos. Lila turned to him, still holding his hand. "Can we get ice cream?" "My dad used to take me after school events." He looked down at her small face, so full of innocent hope, and nodded. "All right, ice cream it is." They walked to a small shop nearby. She ordered chocolate with sprinkles, and he got plain vanilla. They sat on a bench outside, the warm sun shining on their faces. Lila swung her legs back and forth, humming softly as she ate. "You know," she said after a while, "you smile more when you're not wearing your suit." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you noticed that?" She nodded seriously. "You looked too serious last night. Today you look nice, like you're happy." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I am," she grinned, satisfied with that answer. Then her voice grew softer. "Thank you for helping me today. My mom was really sad she couldn't come. She works a lot. She says one day things will get better. I believe her." He looked at her quietly, feeling an ache in his chest that he couldn't explain. "You love your mom a lot, don't you?" "More than anything," she said proudly. "She's the best. She works hard so I can have new shoes and books. But I know she gets tired. I try to help her. I fold the napkins at the bakery sometimes." He listened, realizing how much strength this small child carried. It humbled him. He thought about his own life. The endless meetings, the expensive suits, the money he barely had time to enjoy, and wondered when he had last done something that truly mattered. When they finished their ice cream, he walked her home, even though she kept insisting she could go alone. They passed through narrow streets lined with small shops and old houses. Finally, she stopped in front of a modest apartment building. The walls were faded and the steps looked worn from years of use. "This is where I live," she said proudly. "It's not big, but it's nice," he smiled. "Looks cozy. Do you want to meet my mom?" she asked suddenly. He hesitated. He wasn't sure if that was a good idea. But before he could answer, the door opened and a woman stepped out, wiping flour off her hands. She froze when she saw them. "Lila, who is this?" she asked, looking from her daughter to the tall man beside her. Lila grinned. "Mom, this is the man who helped me today." "He came to school as my daddy." The woman's eyes widened in shock. "He what?" He quickly stepped forward, speaking calmly. "Please don't be upset. She asked me for help yesterday. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted her to have a good day." The mother's expression softened as she looked at her daughter's glowing face. Then she turned to him with gratitude in her tired eyes. "You did a kind thing, sir." "Thank you. I was so worried she'd feel alone." He nodded. "She's a brave little girl. You're raising her well." The woman smiled faintly. "I'm trying." Lila tugged his sleeve again. "Will you come again sometime?" He looked down at her, then at her mother. "Maybe," he said quietly. "If it's all right." The mother nodded gently. "You're welcome any time." He gave a small smile and waved goodbye. As he walked back toward his car, he glanced over his shoulder. Lila stood on the steps, waving her teddy in the air. Her mother had her arm around her, smiling for the first time in what looked like a long time. When he got inside the car, his driver asked, "Where to now, sir?" He paused for a moment, still watching the small apartment fade in the mirror. "Just drive," he said softly. "No hurry today." As the car rolled through the quiet streets, he realized something. For the first tea time in years, his day hadn't been about money or business. It had been about something real. And somehow that small child with the missing-eyed teddy bear had reminded him what being human felt like again. The next few days after the school event were unlike any other in the CEO's life. Work went on as usual, meetings, reports, phone calls. But his thoughts were somewhere else. Every time he tried to focus on numbers, a small voice would echo in his mind, soft but full of life. "You look nice, like a real daddy." He'd catch himself smiling during meetings, which startled his employees. Smiles were rare for him. His assistant even asked once if everything was all right. He simply nodded, but deep down he knew something had shifted. It was strange how one little girl had left such a mark on his routine life. He wasn't used to caring about people, much less strangers. Yet now he found himself wondering if she'd gone to school safely, if her mother was still working those long hours, if they were doing okay. One evening, as he sat in his office staring out at the city lights, he thought about how empty his schedule had felt before that day. Money had been his world, but now it all seemed quiet, lifeless. After a long moment of hesitation, he picked up his phone and called his driver. "I'm going out. Bring the car around." He didn't know exactly where he was going, but he found himself giving the same address as before, the small street where Lila and her mother lived. It was late evening when he arrived. The bakery across the road was still open, its warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. Inside, he saw her mother, still wearing her apron, moving quickly between trays of bread and customers. He stepped inside, the bell above the door ringing softly. She looked up, surprised to see him there. "Oh, it's you," she said, wiping her hands nervously. He nodded politely. "Good evening. I hope I'm not disturbing you." "No, not at all," she said, trying to sound calm. "I just didn't expect to see you again." "I was nearby," he lied gently. "Thought I'd check in. Lila mentioned you work long hours." She smiled faintly, though there was tiredness in her eyes. "Yes, it keeps me busy. But it's honest work." He looked around. The bakery was small but cozy, the kind of place that smelled like comfort. "The bread smells good," he said softly. "Thank you," she replied. "I bake everything myself." They stood in silence for a few moments, the sound of the oven humming behind her. Then she said, "Lila talks about you a lot. She still can't believe someone actually came to that event for her." "You made her very happy," he smiled quietly. "She made me happy too," he admitted. Just then the door opened and Lila ran in, her school bag bouncing on her shoulder. Her face lit up when she saw him. "You came back!" she shouted, running toward him. He crouched down to her level as she threw her small arms around his neck. "I missed you," she said. He couldn't help but laugh softly. "I missed you too, kid." Her mother watched them with surprise and a touch of warmth. Lila quickly began talking, words tumbling out of her mouth in excitement. "Mom, guess what? We're doing another play next month. Can you come? And maybe he can come too?" Her mother looked at him, unsure how to answer. He met her eyes and said gently, "If it's all right with you, I'd like to." She hesitated, then smiled. "You're welcome anytime." She doesn't get much company. It's nice seeing her smile like that. He stayed for a little while longer, sitting at one of the small tables as Lila helped her mother pack bread into bags. The girl kept talking about school, about her friends, about a drawing she made of him and her mom, about how she wanted to become a baker one day so she could help her mother. He listened to every word, realizing how much he had missed simple human conversations like this. It was strange how easy it felt, how natural, even though their worlds were completely different. When it was time to leave, Lila insisted on walking him to the door. "Will you come again?" she asked quietly. He looked down at her hopeful eyes and nodded. "Yes, I will." That night, when he returned to his apartment, it didn't feel the same. The silence was heavier than usual. He walked past his sleek furniture, his expensive paintings, the perfectly arranged kitchen. All of it looked perfect but lifeless. He poured himself a glass of water and sat near the window, looking at the city below. For years he had worked to reach this view, this symbol of success. But tonight, all he could think about was that little bakery, the smell of fresh bread, and the sound of a small girl laughing while holding a teddy bear. Over the next few weeks, he found reasons to visit them. Sometimes he'd stop by the bakery to buy something, though he never ate much bread before. Other times he'd drop off flowers for Lila's mother, pretending it was for the shop. Slowly, he began to notice small things. How Lila's mother always greeted customers with a tired but genuine smile. How she worked even when her hands were red from kneading dough. How Lila would sit in the corner doing homework under the yellow light. It humbled him. He had spent years surrounded by luxury, but here were two people who had so little and yet seemed richer in spirit than he'd ever been. One day, as he sat at a corner table sipping coffee, Lila came over with her school notebook. "Can you help me with this?" she asked, pointing at a math problem. He smiled and nodded. "Let's see what you've got." She sat beside him, swinging her legs under the chair. "I'm not good at this," she admitted. "Mom tries to help, but she gets tired." He took the pencil and began explaining the problem gently. She watched closely, biting her lip in concentration. When she finally solved it on her own, she beamed. "I did it!" "You did," he said, genuinely proud. "You're smarter than you think. Do you think I can be anything I want when I grow up?" she asked suddenly. He looked at her, seeing a reflection of the hope he once had as a child before life hardened him. "Yes," he said softly. "You can be anything, as long as you keep believing it." She smiled brightly, and for a moment he wished he could freeze that image. The innocence, the joy, the pure faith in life. Later that evening, when the bakery closed, Lila's mother sat across from him, wiping the counter. "You've been coming by a lot," she said with a gentle tone. "Not that we mind, but may I ask why?" He paused before answering. "I don't really know," he admitted. "I guess I feel at peace here. It's different from my world." She studied him for a moment. "You're not like most people I meet," she said. "You seem lonely." He looked away, slightly caught off guard. "Maybe I am," he said quietly. "I've spent so long chasing success that I forgot what else life had to offer." There was silence for a while. Then she said softly, "Lila told me you smiled for the first time at that school event. I don't know what kind of life you have, but thank you for being kind to her. She needed that." He met her eyes and nodded. "Maybe I needed it too." From that day onward, they became a small part of each other's lives. He'd sometimes drive Lila to school if her mother was working early. Other times he'd help fix things at the bakery. A flickering light, a broken chair, small things that gave him a strange sense of purpose. He found himself laughing more, sleeping better. Even his employees noticed the change. His assistant whispered to another worker, "He's been different lately, calmer, happier." He didn't tell anyone why. He didn't need to. One rainy afternoon, as he sat in the bakery, he noticed a drawing pinned to the wall. It was by Lila, a colorful picture of three people holding hands under a bright blue sky. Above them, she had written in big letters, "My family." He stared at it for a long moment. Something in his chest tightened. It wasn't sadness, and it was something deeper. The realization that somewhere along the way, he had stopped pretending. When Lila ran up to him later that day, showing him her school certificate for good behavior, he picked her up and twirled her around, laughing like a man who had found a missing piece of himself. "I'm proud of you," he said. She giggled. "You sound like a real dad when you say that." He smiled quietly. "Maybe I just feel like one today." That evening, after saying goodbye, he stood outside the bakery for a long time, watching the lights flicker inside. He could see them laughing. Lila showing her mother something, her mother shaking her head with a smile. For years, he had thought happiness was found in power, money, and success. But now he understood it wasn't about what he had. It was about who he had found. As the rain began to fall harder, he walked toward his car with a calm smile on his face. His assistant had once told him he needed to find a reason to live beyond his job. At the time, he had brushed it off. Now he finally had one. He didn't know what the future would bring, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about pretending anymore. Lila had opened a door he hadn't realized was still there, and behind it was something he thought he'd lost forever: warmth, connection, and the quiet joy of belonging somewhere. As he drove off that night, he glanced once more at the little bakery in his rearview mirror. The glow from its window felt like a promise. soft, steady, and full of hope. The morning sun spilled gently over the city, casting long shadows on the quiet streets. Lila was already awake, humming softly as she prepared for school. Her backpack was neatly packed, and Mr. Buttons, her beloved teddy, sat tucked under her arm. She felt a small flutter of excitement in her chest. Today was special, not because of schoolwork or a test or any of the usual things, but because she was going to see him again. Her mother was already in the kitchen, making beer. Eek fast while wiping her hands on her apron. She moved with the ease of someone who had long accepted life's hardships, yet every now and then, a weary sigh escaped her lips. Lila watched her, feeling a pang in her heart. "Mom," she said softly, "today can I walk a little faster to school?" Her mother glanced up, a smile touching her lips. "Of course, sweetheart. But don't rush too much." Lila nodded, her mind buzzing with anticipation. She had seen him yesterday, yes, but every day with him felt new. He wasn't just the man who had pretended to be her dad. He had become something else, a presence she didn't fully understand, but one that made her heart feel safe. Meanwhile, the CEO was already in his car, driving through the streets with a mix of purpose and hesitation. The past few weeks had changed him more than he would admit. Every day spent with Lila and her mother made him realize how much he had missed in life. He had been focused on schedules, profits, and deadlines for so long that he had almost forgotten the joy of simple moments. Today, he wasn't wearing a suit. A soft blue shirt and dark pants made him look approachable, almost ordinary, which was exactly what he wanted. The last thing he needed was for her classmates or their parents to feel intimidated. Today, he wanted to be just Dad in Lila's eyes. When he arrived at the small schoolyard, he found her waiting by the gate, bouncing slightly on her heels with Mr. Buttons clutched to her chest. The moment their eyes met, she ran toward him, shouting, "You're here!" He bent down and scooped her up in a hug, holding her gently. "I'm here, kiddo," he said with a soft laugh. "Let's make today another great day." She giggled and hugged him tightly. "Can we go see the playground first?" They walked together across the schoolyard, past groups of children laughing and playing. The other parents glanced curiously at the man holding Lila's hand. He smiled politely to a few, nodding, but he didn't speak much. He didn't need to. Lila's happiness was enough conversation. As they reached the swings, Lila hopped onto one and began to swing back and forth, the wind in her hair and laughter spilling from her lips. He pushed gently from behind, feeling the simple joy of being part of someone's life in a way he never had before. Every laugh, every glance, every tiny smile felt like a gift he hadn't known he wanted. After a while, a teacher came over and called the students to line up. Today was the school's arts and crafts morning, a day where children could paint, draw, and make simple crafts with the help of their parents. Lila bounced off the swing and ran to him. "Come on, Daddy. We have to make something." He followed her into the classroom, noting the colorful mess of paints, markers, and glitter spread across tables. Layla grabbed a brush and dipped it in bright yellow. "I want to make a sun," she said, her voice full of excitement. He smiled and picked up another brush. "I think I'll make a tree," he said. He wasn't good at painting, but he didn't care. This wasn't about perfection. It was about being present, being with her and seeing her smile. As they painted, Lila chatted nonstop about school, her friends, and her little adventures. He listened quietly, occasionally asking questions or making small jokes that made her laugh. It was strange for him, after years of speaking mostly in business terms, to engage in conversation so simple, yet so meaningful. The time passed quickly. Before they knew it, the activity was over, and it was time for the parents and children to display their artwork. Lila proudly held up her painting of a bright sun shining over a small house with Mr. Buttons perched on the roof. "Look, it's us!" she exclaimed. He looked at her tree, modest but full of life, and nodded. "That's a strong tree, just like you," he said quietly. The teacher walked around praising the children. "Wonderful work, everyone. These are beautiful." As the children gathered to leave, Lila tugged at his sleeve. "Can we go for ice cream afterward?" He chuckled softly. "Of course. But we have a surprise too." Her eyes widened. "A surprise?" He nodded mysteriously. "Yes, you'll see." They walked together to a small park near the school. Lila ran ahead to the playground first, swinging high on the swing, spinning on the merry-go-round, her laughter echoing across the grass. He watched her for a moment, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Then came the surprise. A small group of children were gathered near a bench, staring curiously. And sitting there was a small box tied with a ribbon. He picked it up and handed it to Lila. "Open it," he said. Her eyes sparkled as she untied the ribbon and opened the box. Inside was a set of paints, brushes, and a small sketchbook, the kind of gift she had mentioned wanting last week. She gasped. "You got this for me?" He nodded. "I thought you might like to keep painting and drawing. You're very talented." Her mother, who had arrived quietly a few minutes earlier, watched with a mixture of gratitude and surprise. She had never seen Lila so animated, so happy. Tears threatened to fall in her eyes, but she held them back. "Thank you," she said softly, addressing him. He shook his head. "No need. She deserves it." For the next hour they sat together, painting, drawing, and creating small works of art. The mother joined in too, adding colors to her own canvas. Lila laughed at her attempts, gently teasing her, and the three of them shared a moment that felt rare and precious. Later, as they walked back to the bakery, Lila held his hand tightly. "I love today," she said quietly. "You're the best daddy ever." He smiled softly, feeling something he had buried for years, warmth, pride, and a deep, almost unfamiliar affection. "I'm glad, kiddo," he said. When they reached the bakery, the mother invited him inside for a cup of tea. He accepted, and they all sat at a small table. Lila chattered about school, the playground, and the art project. Her mother listened quietly, sipping her tea, occasionally smiling at Lila's excitement. The CEO realized he had never felt this way before. So connected to another family, so involved, so needed. For years he had focused on work and achievements, but none of it had ever filled the space in his heart that these two had touched. He stayed longer than usual, helping with small tasks around the bakery, talking to the mother about ways to organize her workspace, suggesting minor improvements that wouldn't cost much. She listened, nodded politely, and smiled. But he could tell she appreciated the effort more than she let on. As the afternoon sun began to set, he stood to leave. Lila ran to him, hugging him tightly. "Will you come again tomorrow?" she asked. He looked down at her, smiling. "We'll see, but I promise I'll try." Her mother watched quietly, a gentle understanding in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything you've done for her." He nodded. "She deserves happiness. That's all I want." Walking back to his car, he felt lighter than he had in years. The world that had once seemed so serious and gray now had color. The laughter of a small child, the warmth of a mother who fought every day to care for her daughter, and the simple joy of creating something together. All of it had opened his heart in ways he hadn't imagined. That night, lying in bed, he thought about the day. About Lila's laughter, her drawings, her simple words. About her mother's quiet strength. About the connection he had begun to feel, one that had nothing to do with business, power, or wealth. He realized something important. Life wasn't just about what you owned or achieved. It was about the moments that touched your soul, the people who made you feel alive, the small acts of kindness that meant more than anything else in the world. As he drifted to sleep, he knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Tomorrow would come, and with it new moments, new laughter, and new ways to be part of something bigger than himself. For the first time in a long time, he felt hope. And he knew deep down that this hope was only possible because of a little girl who had asked him to pretend to be her daddy. Just for one day. The morning air was crisp, carrying a faint scent of flowers from nearby gardens. Lila woke up earlier than usual, her small heart filled with excitement. Today was special, though she didn't fully understand why. It wasn't about school or art projects or even ice cream. Today felt different. Today felt like something important was going to happen. She dressed quickly, choosing her favorite pink sweater and making sure Mr. Buttons was safely tucked under her arm. Her mother, already busy in the kitchen, looked up and smiled as Lila zipped up her backpack. "You look ready for a great day," she said softly. "I hope it will be," Lila replied, her eyes shining. "He's coming, right? My daddy?" Her mother paused for a moment, a gentle smile forming. "Yes, he's coming. Go have a good day." Meanwhile, the CEO was also preparing for the day. Unlike before, there was a sense of anticipation in his movements, a quiet excitement that made him feel lighter than he had in years. Today wasn't about meetings, presentations, or profit margins. Today was about spending time with Lila and her mother, something he had grown to cherish deeply. He chose a comfortable outfit, a simple shirt and pants, avoiding the suit and tie that usually made him look distant and formal. He wanted to be approachable, to fit into the world of a little girl and her mother without the weight of his usual life pressing down. As he drove to their street, he thought about the journey of the past few weeks, from the first day when Lila had asked him to be her daddy, to the school event, the small bakery visits, the laughter and simple moments they had shared. He realized how much these moments had changed him. They had robbed him of something he had long forgotten, what it felt like to truly connect, to care, to be part of someone else's life. When he arrived at the school, Lila was already waiting by the gate, bouncing on her heels, her hair bouncing with each movement. The moment she saw him, her face lit up brighter than the morning sun. "You're here!" she shouted, running toward him. He crouched slightly to meet her level, lifting her in a gentle hug. "I promised, didn't I?" he said softly. Lila giggled. "Yes, you did." "Let's go, Daddy." They walked into the schoolyard hand in hand. Children ran past them, playing games, waving to their parents, laughing and shouting in excitement. Lila's joy was infectious, spreading to him without any effort. He felt lighter, freer, happier than he had in years. Inside the classroom, the children were preparing for a special project. Today, they were going to make dream boxes, small decorated containers where children could put their wishes, hopes, and dreams. Lila grabbed his hand and pulled him to a table. "Come on, we have to make one together." He smiled and sat down beside her. "All right, let's see what kind of dream we can put in our box." She picked up colorful markers and began drawing hearts, stars, and suns on the box. "I want it to be full of happy things," she exclaimed. He joined in, drawing a small house with a garden and a sun above it. "And this is for hope," he said. "Hope that good things happen even when life feels hard." Lila nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, and we can put Mr. Buttons in there too." For the next hour, they worked side by side, creating a small world of color, laughter, and imagination. The teacher came by occasionally, smiling at their work. "You two make a great team," she said. Lila beamed. "He's my daddy," she whispered proudly. When the boxes were finished, each child shared their dreams with the class. Lila's voice trembled slightly as she spoke, but her eyes were full of excitement. "My dream is that everyone I love is happy and safe," she said softly. "And I hope my daddy is always here with me." He felt a lump form in his throat. He realized how deeply she had come to trust him, how much she relied on him in her small, innocent way. He put a hand on her shoulder, squeezing it gently. "I'll always be here for you, kiddo," he whispered. After the class, they walked together to a nearby park. Lila ran ahead to the swings, laughing, spinning on the merry-go-round, shouting with joy. He pushed her gently on the swings, feeling a happiness he had never thought possible. As they rested on a bench eating ice cream from a nearby stall, Lila looked up at him with serious eyes. "Daddy," she said softly, "do you think we can have more days like this?" He smiled, feeling warmth in his chest. "Of course we can. We just have to make them happen." Her mother, who had come to watch, approached quietly. "You've changed her world," she said softly. "And I think you've changed mine too." He looked at her, understanding the unspoken words. She had been carrying a heavy load, raising Lila alone, working long hours, and still finding time to nurture her daughter's happiness. He had seen her strength, and it had touched him deeply. "You've done an amazing job," he said quietly. "She's a wonderful little girl." They spent the rest of the afternoon together, walking through the park, playing games, and talking about small things. For the CEO, it wasn't about control or success anymore. It was about these simple human moments. A little girl's laughter, a mother's gentle smile, and the feeling of being needed and loved in a genuine way. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lila sat beside him on the grass. "Daddy," she said softly, "can we keep being a family even if it's just us?" He looked down at her, feeling a deep, unexplainable emotion. "Yes," he said. "We'll always be a family." Her mother joined them, sitting beside her daughter and smiling. "I never thought I'd see her so happy," she said quietly. "Thank you." For being part of our lives, he shook his head. No, thank you. For letting me be part of it. I've learned more from both of you than I ever thought I could. The evening passed gently. They returned to the bakery, shared a simple meal, and spent time talking, laughing, and planning little adventures for the coming days. Lila's eyes sparkled with joy, her laughter echoing through the small space. Her mother looked at her with pride and relief, a quiet smile on her lips. The CEO realized something important. Life had always been about achievements, money, and schedules. But what truly mattered was connection. The bonds formed with people, the moments shared, the love given and received. Lila had shown him that in ways he could never have imagined. When it was time to leave, Lila hugged him tightly. Thank you, Daddy, she whispered. I love you. He hugged her back, holding her close. I love you too, kiddo. More than you know, her mother smiled warmly. You've brought something wonderful into our lives, she said softly. Thank you for everything. He nodded, feeling a fullness in his heart he hadn't known existed. It's been my honor, he said quietly. As he drove home that evening, the city lights twinkling around him, he reflected on the journey of the past few weeks. A simple request from a little girl had changed his life completely. He had gone from a man focused only on success to someone who understood the value of love, family, and connection. For the first time in years, he didn't feel empty. He didn't feel alone. He felt whole. And it was all because of Lila, her courage to ask, her innocence, her trust, and the gentle strength of her mother, who had welcomed him into their small world. That night, as he lay in bed, he smiled quietly. He knew life would continue to be busy, filled with work and responsibilities. But he also knew that he had found something far more important, a family, laughter, joy, and a place where he truly belonged. And as he drifted off to sleep, he thought of Lila's bright eyes and her simple question that had started it all. Sir, could you pretend to be my daddy? Just for one day. He realized now it hadn't been pretending at all. It had been the start of something real, something lasting, and something that would forever change the way he saw the world and himself. From that day forward, he wasn't just a CEO, a man in a suit with a busy schedule. He was someone who had learned the true meaning of love, care, and family. He was a man who had been given a second chance to feel, to connect, and to live fully. And all it had taken was the courage of a little girl who simply wanted someone to be her daddy. Just for one day,